You are ultimately the people who are going to be responsible for making those payments, and therefore they're going to want to know how you behave. Do you have a history of bouncing checks, of missing credit card payments, of not paying little bills? Because this isn't just about whether or not you've got the money, it's how you perform when you do have the money. So, if you're new in business, raising finance is probably one of the most difficult activities you're going to have to undertake. Raising finance in general is never easy, or never normally easy, but raising finance for new start businesses is particularly difficult. Now, I mean, this is a minefield of an area that we could talk about, but the key things that you need to know are, when you're raising finance for a new start business, you've got two options. You have equity and you have debt. Equity is where you take money in return for selling some shares in the business. The person giving you the money gets a piece of the action. Debt is where you are lent the money and you then repay it along with interest. It's always easier normally to raise debt than it is to raise equity, because people can see exactly where they stand. There's a lot less variables involved than in equity. People would argue that there's a much bigger upside with equity. Yes, there is, but it's much more of a complicated scenario to assess. Now, when you're raising debt for a new start business, because that business doesn't have any track record, the reality is the lenders are going to be relying on the credit and the reliability of the directors and the owners of the business. You're going to be asked to stand behind your loan and to give a personal guarantee. Therefore, it's absolutely essential that as an individual you have good credit, because your business doesn't have any credit at this point, and therefore it's going to be your credit that's looked upon. I mean, even when raising finance for more mature and established businesses, it's actually still very important as an owner or as a director of those businesses to have good credit, because even if you're not giving a guarantee, the chances are any lender is going to credit check you as an individual so that they can see how you behave, what your historical payment history is like. Even if you've got a more established business that's got a credit rating, that's got a financial history, the chances are that any lender is going to want to look at the credit reports of the business owners, of the business directors anyway, because even though you might not be standing behind the loan, even though you may not be guaranteeing it, you are ultimately the people who are going to be responsible for making those payments, and therefore they're going to want to know how you behave. Do you have a history of bouncing checks, of missing credit card payments, of not paying little bills? Because this isn't just about whether or not you've got the money, it's how you perform when you do have the money. And many people out there are very disorganized. They may have the ability to make payments, but they don't have the direct debit set up properly, they don't manage the cash flow properly, so they just cause an annoyance to lenders. So all these things are very important. So get your own personal credit file right, and then that way of operating, that professional attitude should translate into your business as well. But even if you're prepared and able as a business owner to stand behind your business loans, to guarantee them as a new start business, the amount of financing opportunities for startup businesses out there aren't huge. And I think what's very important to do is to actually make sure that when you are setting up a business, you're running it as tight as humanly possible, and you're actually only spending the absolute minimum amount of money necessary. So often I see business plans where people are looking to raise or to borrow tens, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds. And when you actually look into what they want to use that money for, it's such completely unnecessary things. It's fancy offices on day one. It's hiring multiple members of staff when there aren't even any customers. It's to fund a marketing plan which has had no thought or logic behind it. It is ultimately going to end up being money down the drain. So one of the best ways to raise money is actually to make sure you don't need to raise it, or don't need to raise as much as you initially thought, because that's going to make your whole money raising job easier. A key method of raising money for startup businesses and new start businesses is quite often borrowing from friends and family, from stakeholders who've got some kind of vested interest in you. Now, I know a lot of people don't like to go down this route. They like to say, well, I want to stand on my own 2 feet, or I'm not going to go and ask the bank of mom and dad, or I'm not going to rely on my friends, or whatever it may be. My advice is, I think it's quite important to take your ego out of it, because raising money is very difficult for a business, for any business, particularly a startup business. And if you've got people offering to give you money, whether that's a wealthy brother or sister, a generous mom and dad, whatever it may be, I think you really need to think twice if you're considering not taking it, because it could be one of the only opportunities you get for a long while to raise that money. Now look, I can't talk about how that's going to damage your relationship if things go wrong. Only you know what that situation is going to be like there. But I think it's important not to have an ego about it, and not to say, oh, I'm going to do everything for myself, because raising money is very, very difficult. So 3 or 4 key things there. Make sure you're not trying to raise more money than you actually need. Make sure you've tried to tap up any sources who are easy for you to get money from in the first place, friends, family, parents, etc. And also make sure that your personal credit file is as good as can possibly be, because anyone lending that business money is going to want to know that you, the owner, can stand behind it. Aside from that, there's also the opportunity for many businesses to be able to raise grants or potentially even money from business-related charities. That's all going to depend on what area you're in, what type of business you are, what your stage of life is, etc.